Okay, we are broadcasting.
Very good, thank you. So I want to welcome everyone to our monthly El Dorado Hills Community Council meeting. This is the month of July's regular meeting, which we delayed for 1 week because of logistics and trying to make sure we had the ability to broadcast via Zoom with the county staff support, and we had our guest speaker lined up. So that's why we're a week late, but we will be moving to our normal first Monday of the month as much as possible venue here when we get into August. So with that, Kim, if you would just kind of announce the protocols for the meeting, how do people who may be on the telephone can unmute themselves, and I'm going to ask everybody who is on the phone, please make a note of the unmuting process. We're not going to repeat it over and over and over again. We'll probably repeat it once very early on or something, but we're hoping people are learning the process and becoming familiar with it so we can streamline some of the discussion a little bit. So with that, Kim, you want to give us the preamble?
Sure. I do see that John Venga, he's logged in as an attendee. If he raises his hand, I can promote him to a panelist, and that way he can participate that way.
Okay, so I'm not sure he can hear us. Can he hear us?
He should be able to. He's just joining as an attendee.
So he just needs to raise his hand on the screen. There's a raise a hand to make comment that's over on the right-hand side of the screen. If you got the panel, normally it's on the right-hand side, to allow you to be connected as a panelist, because evidently he didn't get the panelist dial in.
No, he did.
There he is.
Okay, there he is. Okay.
All right, very good. Sorry. All right, so we got everybody on board. So with that, Kim, the preamble, please.
Please make sure you unmute yourself when called upon. Individuals representing an organization may request up to 5 minutes. It is at the discretion of the chair to allow for additional time. If you are joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. The clerk will call you by the last 3 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record.
Excellent, thank you. So with that, can I have the leadership team please introduce themselves and tell us what primary role you play on the community council so people can understand names and faces a little bit. So who wants to go for? We can go alphabetical, or whatever you want to do.
I'm Dick Ross. I represent the arena called Good Governance. Basically, it's trying to track activities that occur within our government structure and ensure that they are as transparent as possible and understandable to the citizen.
Thank you, Richard.
I'll jump in. This is John Davey. I'm the chair of the El Dorado Hills Area Planning Advisory Committee. We're a resident organization of volunteers that studies and explores proposed development projects in El Dorado Hills, and we provide resident feedback to the county planning process and to the applicant.
Thank you, John. How about the other John? Is he there still? Yep. John Vania, we can't hear you. Are you?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies for being a little late. I had a problem getting on there. But yeah, I'm the planning commissioner for District 1 as well as deal with infrastructure issues. So.
Okay, so Glenn?
Glenn.
Yeah, Glenn.
Glenn Krakow. I am the Community and Economic Development representative for District 1 to the County Committee for the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. And Chief Lilienthal?
Yes, I'm Michael Lilienthal. I represent the Public Safety Group. Essentially what I try and do is network a problem that one of our community members might have with either the sheriff or the CHP or probation or any of our other law enforcement partners to try and help resolve that problem.
Very good. And Cindy?
I'm Cindy Muntz. I'm Supervisor Heidel's assistant, and I do the community information and outreach for the community council.
Very good. So the other thing that we usually do as part of the opening of the meeting is to identify any District 1 commissioners or committee members present, and I can't see a list of all of the attendees. So I would ask for any commissioner or committee member that serves the Board of Supervisors that hasn't already spoken, please identify what your role is in supporting the District 1 activities. So you might have to unmute yourself.
Supervisor Heidel, they'll need to raise their name so I can allow them to talk, and then they could introduce themselves.
Okay, So they would need to raise their hand, is that correct?
Yes, please.
Okay. So anyone who is one of our volunteers supporting District 1 who would like to be identified at this point, please raise your hand in the Zoom meeting, and then we can open up the line.
We have Wendy Mae Davis.
Welcome, Wendy.
Hi there, everyone. Yes, as most of you already know, I work with our County Assessor Appeals Board, and I just help to make sure that our taxes are assessed properly and appropriately.
Very good. Thank you for that. Anyone else?
Tita Bladden.
Evening, Tita. How are you?
I'm good. This is Tita Bladen. I'm on the El Dorado County Commission on Aging.
Thank you for participating. You're a regular attendee. We appreciate that.
And that is all, Supervisor Heidel.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Kim. So having completed item 1 on the agenda, I'm going to move to item 2, adoption of the regular meeting agenda. Is there anyone on the leadership team who would like to propose a change either in the sequence or an addition of something that we can at least discuss without making decisions on? So any proposed changes to the agenda from the leadership team?
No.
Okay, then we'll take item 2 as being complete. Number 3, a public comment. This is a very important part of our meeting. This is the opportunity we always want to present for anyone who's in attendance to go ahead and speak to an item that's not on this evening's agenda. So we would ask that you consider that. If it's an item that we have covered on the agenda already, please hold your comment until that point. But I do believe when we're talking about Calathea Park, for instance, that is not on the agenda tonight. We hope to get a report from various sources, but I think if anybody either talking about Heaven or Calathea Park would like to bring those items up, it would be an appropriate time to do that now under public comment. So anyone on the leadership team, first of all, that would like to comment on any of that? Michael, I know you've been very involved.
Yeah, I can give maybe a brief summary of what has transpired at this point. But, essentially, we had the problem going on for years up in Heaven, where the kids were coming up, or not just kids, but lots of people. And we've had a lot of people hanging out there on the weekends. They've started fires over the years, and it's an interesting crowd. It's not El Dorado Hills residents, not all, although some are, but a lot are coming from the Sacramento Valley. And so there's been a lot of work done up there. Supervisor Heidel, various members of the county, I mean, from everybody, we've really teamed up and been trying to work on this issue for quite a bit of time. One of the impacts of pushing people out of that area, it appears, is that they have decided that Calathea Park is a good spot to go. Because if you've ever been to Calathea Park, just a fantastic view again, looking out over the Sacramento Valley. And so it's had a lot of attention. I noticed the issue was a problem talking to some of the residents. I actually went there, I would call it off duty in my personal vehicle, dressed normal with my kids, and went there one evening, and there was 100 people there watching the sunset. It was remarkable how many people were there. And then since then, the neighbors have complained about lots of activities that would be way inappropriate happening late after hours after the park was closed. There's been bottles being broken. They found needles, all kinds of paraphernalia that would be not suited for kids. And they've just had a lot of what would be disorderly, loud, inappropriate activities occurring in the park of everything you can possibly imagine. So neighbors are very frustrated. They've been getting active and getting involved. They've been talking to the sheriff. They've been talking to Supervisor Heidel. I've talked to them as well, and they're working on strategies to try and resolve that problem. I think that's a summary of what the problem is. And there's been a lot of work done by everybody trying to come up with some solutions. They've hired a security company, the HOA has there. And I saw them out there last weekend. I went there at about 9 at night, and then I went there at 10 at night. And it was interesting. The security company seems to be helping a little. They've also turned the sprinklers on a little bit earlier in the night to try and help drive people out. But they still have a number of issues of parking on the roadsides, and they chase a group of people out, and then people come after and cause trouble again. So I would say that's kind of a summary, high-level summary of the issue, and I know there's probably people out there who would love to talk about it.
Just let me add just a couple more comments. I think for those of you that may not understand it, Calathea Park is part of the Community Services District Operations El Dorado Hills. So I know Kevin Lowen and other members of the board are aware of this particular problem. I believe they've actually entertained security patrols out in that area. And so I'm not sure what's going on, but the other law enforcement agent is involved more so probably with Heaven is our CHP. Because wherever we have parking that's in violation of the posted signs, et cetera, that's a primary CHP enforcement item and not the sheriff, although the sheriff has the ability to enforce against that. So we really have both levels of our law enforcement, our CHP and our sheriff's department have been working extended time to try to help resolve the Heaven issue. The Calathea Park is a little different dimension. And again, the CSD's involvement in that. But with that, I would like to just open it up for anyone from the public who would like to comment and get started with that discussion. So is there anybody here who would like to comment on either Heaven or Calathea Park?
There
I
are,
guess they have to raise their hand, is that
yeah, there are
correct?
4 people with their hands up, or 3,
Okay.
4.
Okay,
Now accepting public comment from Melissa Peterson.
go ahead, Melissa.
Hi, my name is Melissa Peterson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I live in Villadoro, right next to Heaven, and I've been here for about 2 years. I've noticed an increase in activity with the trash and the graffiti, and I've heard about even some stabbings and fires before, I moved here, which was about 2 years ago. But, like there's been issues for me where there's like broken glass all over the street where I have to drive my car through it. And of course, we're all kind of frustrated with the level of activities, specifically after the sun sets. And I was wondering, I know there's no parking signs, but there's a whole area on Beatty that continues southeast all the way to Via Fiore. That's a dirt area. I was wondering if we could possibly get any like no parking tow-away signs that, we could help enforce if we're, calling the tow company or anything further that we can do to help relieve the area of some congestion and improper behavior.
So we'll take all the questions and comments now, and then we'll allow people on the Leadership Council and our law enforcement agencies to respond once we've heard everybody's comments, if that's okay.
Sure.
So Kim, who else do we have?
Now accepting public comment from Alan Priest.
Alan, welcome.
Alan, could you please unmute yourself?
There we go. That's better. How's that?
Very good.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, thank you guys for having this topic right at the forefront here. Just wanted to add a couple quick comments. As the landowner, the CSD is extremely aware on a daily basis of all the issues in that park. We have basically a complaint in the hotline. We've got staff at the ready every weekend and are doing our best to engage our security team to be out there every evening to escort people off the park as the chief had commented on. We've also readjusted staff time. They're there at the CSD park until 9 o'clock to actually spend the last hour or so of their time. So we're making some changes. We've got some new signage coming in that's very clear about some of the key issues, which includes music, which is not allowed in our parks, organized sports that are not run through the CSD are typically not allowed, and that's happening quite a bit and causing a lot of concern. So I think our next step and what we have proposed to the local community members there is to be the conduit for a stakeholder meeting where we can have the CHP, sheriff, fire, county representatives, as well as the CSD as the landowner and main operator of that park, all in attendance. So we'd like to get that going and set that up here in the next week or two so that we can all just talk through what the key issues are, have representatives from the community there, and then the 5 or 10 or 15 ways that we can mitigate some of the issues and make it not so attractive to be present in that park as soon as the sun goes down, which is it's a dawn to dusk park for us, and it's all about implementing measures to get people out of there and make sure they don't come back. So we're all ears and we're on point on this thing as far as it's got our attention, and we'll get this figured out. That's it.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that. So anyone else?
Now accepting public comment from Tammy.
Tammy, can you
Hello.
hear us?
Yes.
Oh, there you go. You're on. Thanks.
Okay. So I'm Tammy Welch, and I'm in the neighborhood of Calathea, and CETA. The way this is set up, I'm used to Zoom where you can see everybody, but we can't see everybody. So CETA is our little spokesperson, and so she's going to speak. But I did want to thank CSD, CHP, Sheriff. Everybody's taking this very seriously, and I do appreciate that very much. My only question is citations being done at Heaven? And I just, at one time, you know, there was the threat of citations, but now I'm not sure if that's actually happening. And I was just curious about that. But I'll let CETA talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tammy.
Supervisor Heidel, CETA's version of Zoom is an older version, and in order for her to speak, I would have to promote her to panelist. Do you feel comfortable allowing me to do that?
Yes, if you can unpromote her after she's done speaking. Does that work?
Yes, I can.
All right, so let's do that just to facilitate it. I think that's important that we hear CETA's voice in this.
Okay. CETA, you can go ahead and speak.
CETA, it looks like you're unmuted. Can you hear us and can you speak, please? Yeah. I don't see a mute. We can see you, but we can't hear you yet.
Not working. Yeah. It's like, yeah, she's videoing. No.
The calling number.
She said there's no call-in number. There is.
There is a call-in number. CETA, if you can, go ahead.
It's 530-621-7603.
And there's a meeting ID.
So let's repeat that. 530-621-7603. And then the ID number that goes with that when you get to the queue, and I'll wait until you're ready. Okay, so the ID number.
Sorry, I didn't realize that to call in.
Good, you got it on. All right, very good.
Sorry about that. It wanted me to call in. It took me a minute. Sorry. Okay.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, you guys. Hello, neighbors. Okay, so I'm speaking tonight on behalf of myself, our neighbor here in Calathea, Mike Rapolo. He's unable to attend due to a memorial service. And a large coalition of very unhappy and concerned neighbors from 3 El Dorado Hills villages about several issues that are affecting our neighborhood with the brand name of El Dorado Hills. These neighborhood villages are the Promontory, Ridgeview Village, and Villa del Oro. So the problem locations that I just briefly wanted to address is issues relating to the Calathea neighborhood park and surrounding streets, the area known as Heaven at Beatty and Powers Drive to the west. And then we have some vacant lots at approximately 228 Powers Drive at Moss Ridge at the the South Promontory Gate that is having illegal activity. The issue, we're having systemic and ongoing issues which are all interrelated. Historically, these issues were only occurring after sunset. Today, the issues have evolved to, at times, a 24/7 byproduct of social media, exacerbated by COVID-19. The issues are no longer challenges of local El Dorado Hills youth, as mentioned by Mike, looking for a place to hang out. We're now faced with an influx of visitors and park patrons from outside our community, surrounding counties, who purposefully seem to be trying to incite people, engaging in illegal behavior. They're disrespecting our residents. They are not obeying the rules, and everyone in our neighborhood now is at escalated risk for crime, escalation of crime, fire threats, that's the wildland and other structures, traffic issues, over congestion and parking, neighborhood peace of mind and quality of life, property value, safety is a big issue. We're having verbal assaults taking place if a neighbor comes out to ask even if music is turned down. Specific to Calafia Park, for both our neighbors and park goers, this park was initially designed for neighbors and park goers within a 1 mile radius, so local residents with families and children to attend this park. Obviously, as stated earlier, that's no longer the case. Local residents are often fearful to even enter the park. It's become overrun, and if parents try to reason with any of these park goers that are breaking these rules, we're met with aggression, hostility, disrespect, and escalated behavior. So we're dealing right now with inconsistent enforcement. And there's it's unclear, the CSD's official rules and regulations pertaining to all the parks. It's difficult to identify any cohesive policy on the website that would also contain penal codes and how these rules and regulations would be enforced. That's something we are in discussion with the CSD about. Obviously, there are issues regarding staffing of local law enforcement agencies. We are in communication with them, and we don't want to overburden them, but we do need to be on the radar consistently. So actions that we'd like to take has been mentioned briefly. I've actually spoken with Mike Lilienthal and emailed with Alan Priest. Today I was on the phone with Jim Honeycutt of the Department of Transportation, the Traffic Operations Division. I also spoke with Allied Universal regarding some of the security guards to try to get the guards that are more effective out to these properties, the parks. So rather than getting into the details, the specifics of the things in the public forum that we're dealing with, it's become so much and wide-reaching. Myself, Michael Polo, and numerous other constituents have been communicating in writing, sending pictures and videos to authorities via phone call to the CSD, the Sheriff's Department, CHP, Fire, all these things as mentioned, the HOA, and Mr. Hidal's office. I'm grateful for the engagement we've received so far. Our goal is to try to now take action and move forward instead of just complaining. We really want to put the steps, like enact policy changes, get everyone, agency heads involved. So tonight, at this forum, I appreciate the opportunity to let you guys know about the increasing volume and serious nature of the issues that have been escalating in our neighborhood. It's impacting our safety, our quality of life, our home values, and peace of mind. Please support us in pulling together a task force, okay, to address this issue. Michael Polo, who most of you know, a lot of you know, is a neighbor of mine here, and he's happy to help in leading this, and he and I can partner together and represent our neighborhood. I am receiving daily text messages, videos, phone calls, emails from my neighbors. I have a Google Drive going I'd like to share with people. So Mike has a combined, as you know, like 75 years of law enforcement, fire and fire service between El Dorado and San Bernardino counties. I'm a registered nurse and just a concerned community member that I have a lot of chutzpah, okay? We're requesting your help okay, to coordinate a meeting of our community's public service agencies with a select number of neighborhood representatives, okay, and HOA representatives. The problems are fixable now, hopefully, in coordination. We feel that if we don't address this now with a sense of urgency, the issues are going to result in an increase in crimes, risk to the neighbors physically, park goers, children, threat of wildland and fires I mentioned, DUIs, littering, everything else that we've been facing. That's pretty much it. We wanted to have kind of a published statement to read out to you, and we really appreciate that you guys are hearing us. Thank you, Alan, for being here and speaking up, and Mike Lilienthal, thank you, and Melissa and Tammy.
Thank you, Sita. So we'll get to a brief response here shortly, but is there anybody else, Kim, that's in the queue to comment on this?
You do have one other panelist raising his hand.
Okay, so if the only panelists, let's go to the panelists now, and then we'll hear from Chief Lilienthal first of all for any top-level comments he may have, and then I'd like to go to our law enforcement personnel who may be on the line, whether it be CHP or the Sheriff's Office. So which panelists raised their hand? Let's see. Tim, is that correct?
Yes.
Go ahead, Tim.
We experienced this years ago down in Southern California at various locations, and we found that one of the most effective ways is with the CHP absolutely enforcing the no parking and tow away. You engage every towing company that's under contract with CHP in El Dorado County. You don't give warnings. You put the ticket on it and you line up 10 tow trucks in a row, and they come in and start hauling cars and trucks away. With the $250 fine plus the $400 it takes to get your car or truck out of the towing facility, the storage facility, people get ticked off, but they also don't come back because it's very expensive. If it's children or teenagers or college kids whose parents own the car, those parents are going to be on those kids pretty aggressively. So I do believe if you have the correct signage there and you just take a Friday or Saturday night when you have the most, people are going to see their car being towed, and other people are going to get in their cars and go away because they don't want their cars taken away as well by the towing company. That's all. Thank you.
All right, yeah, that's a proposed solution, so I appreciate that. So Chief Lilly, do you have any kind of overriding comments based upon what you've heard that we haven't discussed? I think you're muted, Mike.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think a lot of the comments that Alan Priest mentioned are definitely appreciated. It sounds like the CSD is working on some solutions already, and I heard him suggest a task force or a group of people getting together, which is what Sita mentioned as well. And I think that's our best opportunity here is let's get a group of CHP, sheriff, fire, DOT, CSD for sure, since it's they're the property owner, quote unquote, and see what we can't come up with. I know some strategies are in play, and I'd love to hear how they're working. And I think that avenue will see a lot of good steps being taken. And then I think this is a problem that we'll need to try something and evaluate and try something more. So that's my suggestion.
I agree with that. My understanding is the CSD was taking the lead in setting up the meeting. I don't know if Alan's still on, but I'm hopeful that that's the sequence, because I think for Calathea at least, we can maybe have to separate Heaven out. But for the Calathea park issues, I would hope the CSD would kind of orchestrate that meeting.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Lowen's on as well as Alan Priest. They both raised their hand. I think they'll give us some good insight.
Okay. So Alan or Kevin, you want to respond to that?
Kim will have to add him in.
Yeah, Kim will have to open it up for either Alan Priest or Kevin Lowen.
Alan, you're able to speak.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's accurate. CSD will take on the leadership role, like I say, in the next week or two to try and get a meeting of all the stakeholders put together and get through the half dozen or so and the ideas that will really bring some change to this current situation, at least from a Calathea part. Heaven's its own kind of animal that we're not really party to on that end, but I think they're one and the same. People have been pushed out of heaven, and that's where they're landing now. So I think one of our global goals should also be not to just push the problem onto another park or another location in the community, and try and have some little more sustainable efforts on managing some of the bad behavior that we're seeing. That's all I've got. So I'm sure Kevin might provide some more detail.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. So Kevin, Kim, can you open it up for Kevin?
Kevin, you can go ahead and speak.
All right. Yeah, so Director Priest or Alan Priest is right. We have no problem taking the lead on primarily Calathea Park, but not being not turning a blind eye towards the property between Heaven and the park. That's always been part of our conversation. My dialogue with the sheriff's office, the one who's put in charge or taking the lead on that Heaven issue. We were looking to start a meeting with all the stakeholders, and then we saw that one of the residents, and I joined this meeting a little bit late, but one of the residents had got something going, and I did touch base with them and asked, you know, if you're taking the lead, then we'll step back. We're always happy if residents kind of taking the lead, but it sounds like an agency needs to do that, and from the park perspective, we can do that. And I know it presents tons of challenges. People are trying to get out and use the space. It's right up against homes. We've been assessing it, collecting a lot of data, both from security, staff, personally, myself, some video components that we have going on out there. So we're collecting a lot of data to ascertain exactly how bad is the situation at the park. And again, we're not monitoring those other two sites though. So yeah, we'll get something going here with the stakeholders, which you have the residents that are outside of the HOA, you have the HOA inside Calathea, you have us, fire, safety, and I suppose whoever else, but we'll take that lead.
Thank you, Kevin. I think that's where it needs to kind of be coordinated, and that'll get us going. And we'll cover the Heaven stuff separately as much as we need to, so we'll try to limit the conversation. But as you said, there's a lot of synergistic aspects of it. It's described as a whack-a-mole. You kick them out of Heaven, they go to Calathea. So yeah, it's a combined issue. And I will mention as well at this point that DOT has been engaged by the county to look at what kind of signage we can put out there, and they work with Chief Lilly to put some signs up. We've gone back out and repainted the red curbs that had kind of faded in over time and stuff. So I know our DOT has been active in trying to discourage illegal parking, et cetera, in the Heaven area, but I don't think we've done anything with respect to the park. So I think we're headed in the right direction on that. And with that, I guess I'd like to open it up for any comments from either our CHP representative or a representative from the Sheriff's Office. Do we have anybody who can raise their hand here if we would like to comment on that?
Officer Brown's in the attendee list. And do you want a map? I can share my screen if you want a map of it.
I don't want to take the time under public comment to go to that. We'll have the meeting and we'll go through it, John, but I don't think as a public comment item, we should get more than just understanding of the issue. So Officer Brown, are you able to speak to what's been going on in Heaven and whatever your involvement has been with Calathea?
Officer Brown?
Yeah, my audio has been cutting in and out, so hopefully you guys can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, I received one phone call from a resident up near Calathea 2 weeks ago regarding the issues of, like, it was described whack-a-mole, where enforcement is happening over at Heaven. And then a question was asked, well, is there enforcement happening over there? And the answer is yes. There is tickets, there is enforcement going on. I know from even 3-4 years ago, we've been writing tickets, towing cars out of Heaven for a while. And then COVID broke out, became an issue again. And then, like we said, we've kind of squeezed them over to Calathea. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows that there is a process that has to be in place with the county. I do not want to speak for county roads whatsoever, but for signage, for enforcement, signage has to be appropriate. So that is the county's role. Our role is the enforcement of that signage. And yeah, I like the idea of just rolling in 10 tow trucks and towing cars. That's great for me as a highway patrol officer. I love it, but we need to make sure that the signage is appropriate. Any questions for me though about like Heaven or Calathea?
And unless the panelists have questions, I don't want to get in the back and forth on this one subject because again, it's public comment. Just it's an awareness, a brief discussion, recognizing we got a follow-up plan. So unless one of the panelists had a question for Officer Brown at this point, I'm not seeing any raised hands.
We do, Supervisor Hardo, we have someone by it. It's SHAKES raising their hand. Do you want me to unmute them?
Yeah, we can add that as a public comment. Yeah, please.
Accepting public comment from Shakes.
Sue Hawks.
Hi, it's Sue Hawks, HAWKES. I'm board president for the HOA for Villadora. Lived here 13 years, seen 4 to 5 fires at Heaven, and previously put up with a lot of the horrible activity that Calathea is now experiencing in Villadora before we figured the gate access. I thank you so much to everybody, to Sita and everybody else. I thoroughly sympathize with my neighbors in Calathea, and I realize that the CSD has jurisdiction over there, does not have it at Calathea, but I would beg all of you, please, not to forget us, and if you would give us some important consideration too, because we're dealing with landowners who may or may not, be so willing to necessarily help with this issue. We have to investigate that. But we have different issues. We don't have a curb to paint red, but I love the idea of the tow trucks. I mean, that will get people's attention. So we have slightly different issues, but also very much the same. Thank you very much, all of you. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Sue. So do we have any representative from the Sheriff's Department? I don't think we've heard one. Is there anybody out there that would like to raise their hand and comment from the Sheriff's Department?
Officer Brown is raising his hand again.
Okay, open it up, please.
Officer Brown.
So one last thing, I just want to make a comment. There was about Calathea. There's a couple of comments, and even with the person I talked to a couple of weeks ago about, we have pictures, we have video. You should see our drive and our collection. That's great, but traffic enforcement is by nature time sensitive. So our for these issues, parking issues, I'll just say it right now. Our non-emergency number for CHP non-emergency dispatch is 916-861-1300. And instead of, putting it on Nextdoor app, putting it on your computer at home, call it in. It needs to be enforced. So if there is enforceable action that can be taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, so I'm going to shut down the Calathea and Heaven discussion at this point. Just ask, is there any other public comment that anyone would like to make at this point in time that's not part of the agenda? I don't want to overlook that. So if you do have a additional comment you want to make, not related to anything we've talked about or anything on the agenda, please raise your hand now so Kim can recognize you.
John, I wanted to, well, there was a question on one of the people who called in on the Heaven. I wanted to address, if that's okay.
But let's see if there's any more public, and then we'll get back to your comments, okay. John. Appreciate that. Right. So Kim, is there anybody else raising their hand from the public?
Supervisor Heidel, there is no additional public comment.
Okay, so John Vania, please proceed.
Thank you. Yeah, when I was still working for DOT, I actually started, designating the no parking zones and the painting of curbs and stuff. So I'm very familiar with this, and a tremendous amount of county resources have been applied for this issue, as well as CHP and the fire department for many years. But one of the, I think it was the first person who had called in, had indicated about the dirt portion of Beatty. That portion that doesn't have curb and gutter on each side or sidewalk, it's an approved subdivision, but it has not been built and accepted, where they're going to be adding curb and gutter and sidewalk and developing that. And so the county doesn't have that currently, that portion as county is, that it's county maintained. So it's currently not county maintained. So there's a gap in there. And so unless, the developer wants to voluntarily place signs, we really don't have, the county does not have authorization, to post no parking signs because it's currently not county maintained. So I just wanted to address that issue.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping it brief. So at this point, I'm going to close out public comment. There will be a follow-up meeting for those of you involved. Look for a message from the CSD or some other resident or something to try to get this started. But I volunteered to be as active as I can be in trying to find solutions to this and working with our various agencies. So again, thank you for bringing it to our attention, and it will be a follow-up activity. So with that, I'm going to move on to item 4, our guest speaker. We have our CAO, the El Dorado County Chief Administrative Officer, Don Ashton, here with us this evening. And I know Don puts in long days, so I want to get to his presentation because we are looking at budget items at the Board of Supervisors, even some discussion. Tomorrow's board meeting to be followed by other discussions, and so we're leading up to try to get to a final budget out in the September timeframe. But I wanted Don to be able to share with you his thoughts on where we are and where we're headed. So with that.
Thank you, Supervisor, and thank you all for having me again. I'm going to be giving a lot of percentages and numbers. I'll try to keep it as easily understandable as possible. The primary point that I want to make, and if you can take away, is there's just so much uncertainty right now with everything. I will tell you, last week, my office was working off a certain set of assumptions for revenues coming in. And then last night, about 8:45, I got a call from our health officer who had just gotten off a call with California Department of Public Health saying the governor was going to be announcing today that statewide, all dine-in restaurants and bars were closed. And in 30 counties, you have nail salons, barbershops, gyms, fitness centers, list goes on, they're closed. We're, according to our health officer, we're likely 2 to 3 weeks out from being on that list. So all that, it makes it really hard to project sales tax and transit occupancy tax. Those are the two big ones. So we'll talk about those a little bit, and I'll try to answer any questions you guys have. So I'm going to start with, and I'm going to really focus on the primary revenue sources the county receives. First one, property tax. By conversations with the assessor and the treasurer tax collector, we don't think COVID-19 is going to be impacting property tax, at least in fiscal year 2021. If it continues too long, it could eventually start to impact housing prices, but we don't think so. That being said, the housing market has been slowing. So in 2018-19 and several years before that, we were always projecting 5% growth in property tax revenue. In 2019-20, we lowered that to 4%. Our projections right now for year end of 19-20 is to come in about 3.96% growth. So pretty close to what we projected. In talking to the assessor, he thinks the tax roll is going to close 3.5 to 4.5% growth. So what my office is going to be recommending to the board as a revenue assumption is a 3.5% growth for 2021. Down about 0.5%, that's about $400,000. And we think that's actually pretty cautious. If the board
somewhat conservative, hopefully, right?
Yeah, so we kind of categorized our assumptions into cautious, conservative, and status quo. And that has changed. Those definitions have changed a little bit since COVID started, because I always used to say we're conservative. Now I don't know if conservative is good enough. Might need to go cautious. So that's property tax. Not a big deal there. For dollar perspectives, keep in mind our secured property taxes in the $72 million range. So that's our big one. That's the big one. Transit occupancy tax. We'll jump to that one for a minute. That's a hotel tax for tourism. We essentially lost a quarter of TOT revenue when the governor closed the first time around from March into June. at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, most of our TOT comes from the Tahoe region, and they weren't allowed to have the vacation home rentals. At this point, there's no indication the governor is putting restrictions on lodging yet. But as quickly as things change, we just don't know.
But he still has a travel ban in place.
The travel ban is still in
statewide
place.
level, so yeah.
We estimate that our year-end projections for 1920 were to come in about 20% lower than what we had projected in January. That's because of that lost quarter, okay? If additional restrictions are put in place and lodging is restricted again, which it seems like it could based on the governor's actions today, we estimate that could go as high as a 40% loss of TOT. Now, TOT, I said property taxes in the $72 million range, TOT is in the $5.3 million range. So 40%, you're looking at a couple $1 million cut from there. That would be the cautious approach. If we want to go conservative, we're going to be recommending a 20% reduction. So that's the TOT. And again, so much of it will be driven on what the governor does, but not just that. We're now hearing there's some countries and some states saying you can't. They're not going to allow their residents to travel to California because of the spiking numbers. So I know someone who rents a vacation home in Tahoe. They had a guest coming from Switzerland. This guest they canceled last week. So even if the travel is the VHRs are still allowed, you're going to have some guests who just aren't comfortable coming and they're going to cancel on their own. So trying to find that. So 20 to 40% reduction in TOT in that regard. Questions so far before I get into sales tax, because sales tax is where it gets tricky and more complicated. From, I guess I'll say from the leadership group, anything yet? Not seeing anything. So sales tax. This is where it gets confusing because sales tax is collected in so many different buckets. I'm going to start with sales tax for the road fund. So the road fund is primarily driven off of gasoline sales tax. Well, what happened in the last quarter of the fiscal year? Everyone stopped driving because they weren't allowed to go anywhere. Then what happened to oil prices? They tanked, so then any tax on the price of gas was generating less because it was a lower, gas prices were so low. Depending who you talk to, you get all kinds of different answers of how quickly that's going to bounce back. But based on information from CSAC, California State Association of Counties, we were estimating about a $900,000 reduction in road fund monies, road fund tax revenues. I don't have the percentage on that one, but about $900,000. What does that mean? Well, it means less road repair. Quite frankly, Raphael, the transportation director, said they'll focus on, I always say, I can't get these words right, ditching and brushing versus actual filling potholes, because it's cheaper and you get more out of it. But so that should be a significant issue for the board to have to grapple with. Do they want to try to backfill that $900,000 with general fund? Well, then where's that to come from? So now I'll get into the
or tribal funds,
or
which
tribal
is the other
funds.
Discretionary, right?
Could be tribal funds, absolutely.
Or a combination, who knows?
Or a combination thereof. General sales tax. We typically, in a normal year, we estimate about 2% growth in general sales tax. With COVID and in talking to HDL is really a statewide leader in analyzing sales tax numbers and things. This one's really all over the place, and it really depends how quickly you think the economy is going to start coming back. So locally, as of last week, locally, we thought we weren't in bad shape because our economy was open. It doesn't matter if LA, for general sales tax, it doesn't matter if LA stays closed or the Bay Area stays closed. Our local sales tax dollars, we thought would come back pretty quick. With the announcement today, we're not sure. And if we go onto the watch list, it's going to get even worse. So Friday, my recommendation to the board was to be a conservative approach of reducing sales tax growth to a 10% reduction in sales tax revenue. Based on the governor's announcement today, On next Tuesday, I'm going to be recommending we go off an assumption of 20% reduction. And that's assuming we're closed for like another 3 months or so. I have asked the auditor for his analysis. He's going to send a memo to the board, hopefully by Wednesday, of what his analysis of the reduction in sales tax is, just so the board has 2 sets of eyes looking at it. He thinks my 20% is in the ballpark, but the board, if he comes back at 10% or 30%, the board needs to try to figure that out. At the end of the day, we're all going to be wrong. It's just what do we want the consequences of the errors to be?
So the one saving grace with sales tax, as I understand, is Amazon purchases. Yep. People are buying goods and services online in lieu of going to a store. The county does benefit from those sales tax revenues as opposed to driving to Costco and buying something, which then goes to the city of Folsom in terms of those sales tax. So the Amazon purchases, which a lot of people have gone to, are actually a stabilizing factor relative to our reduction in sales tax. But when you think about all the stuff going on with the wineries, when you think about our normal Apple Hill season is coming up this fall, and what's that going to be, and the Christmas tree sales beyond that, and all those things that generate sales tax that the county participates in the receipt of and we can use for services, those are all huge unknowns at this point. So I think your range is right, but you're absolutely right. None of us are going to be right. Whatever you guess is going to be wrong. It'll be what it'll be, right? So go ahead.
So the next one is Prop 172, and outside of Chief Lilienthal, well, Tim's probably familiar with Prop 172. Do I need a background on what Prop 172 is?
Probably wouldn't hurt to give just a short segment. Most people don't recognize the numbers.
So when Prop 172 is a half-cent sales tax that was passed by the voters to backfill the loss of property tax revenues that were given to counties and then shifted to education. So it's on every dollar, a half cent of that, and it goes into a state pool. And then it's allocated proportionally amongst the residents in counties across the state. So unlike the general sales tax, which comes to us, this sales tax sits in a state pot and it gets allocated to El Dorado County. So that sales tax is impacted by the LAs and the San Diegos and the Bay Area counties if their economies aren't opening. We get about $11 million. It's about how much we got in 1920. That is one, if you talk to HDL, they are thinking that the reductions could be anywhere from 18 to 30% reductions in that. If we go the cautious recommendation of a 20% reduction, in dollar amounts, that is about a $4 million hit to the public safety department. So the sheriff gets about 75% of it. The district attorney gets some, probation and public defender all get some. So the conversation we're going to have with the board on Tuesday is the 20% a reasonable assumption to make versus more like a 10%? And regardless of the amount, does the board want to, at least philosophically, say we're going to hold those departments harmless for that loss of revenue and take it from other general fund discretionary sources to keep them whole? So under this 20% scenario, the sheriff would have to cut about $1.7 million out of his budget. That's he already cut 1.2 in the recommended budget. So now you're getting into some big dollar amounts.
And 80% of his budget is probably staff. So ultimately it means staffing reductions, which is the sad part.
Yeah. So that's a scary one. And because again, when I look at local control versus statewide control, we have obviously no influence on these larger counties. And if it takes them a year to reopen, these revenues are going to get hit really hard. The same thing goes with our realignment programs. So realignment programs are programs that used to be the responsibility of the state to provide. So social services, public health, behavioral health, and the Community Corrections Partnership, Public Safety Realignment, which is the most recent one. That was in 2011 when they reduced the jail population. They said counties have to take on the oversight of all those people. Well, when realignment happens, and this is some of my opinions on this, the state always says it's in the best interest of local control. Well, they send money with it, but they've never sent enough money to fund the whole thing. And my opinion is if they had enough money to fund it, they wouldn't be giving us local control. They would keep it. That's my sidebar. But because that realignment programs the revenues come from primarily sales tax and vehicle license fees. It is impacted by COVID at the state level. In the governor's May revised budget, the average cut to each of these programs was about 13%. The nuance here kind of swings the other way. In the final budget that was adopted, the governor is allocating $750 million statewide of federal money to backfill those lost revenues. What does that mean for El Dorado County? I think we get about $5 million of that. Then there's a trigger that come October, if we get additional federal money, that we'll be allowed to backfill. It could lessen that. So, but where we're at today, we'll still be facing a 6 to 7% cut in our realigned programs. The board has the option of saying we want to use general fund to keep those programs whole. That's to be a conversation that they will have to have at some point. But where do those general fund monies come from?
So you know the dollars amount on the 6 to 7% cut, is that like $500,000 or?
I think it's about that.
Yeah, okay, that would make sense.
Yeah. So, and I don't have, it's a little different for each realigned program.
Yeah.
That's a cumulative, so. So those are kind of the framework. On July 21st, we're going to be having this discussion with the board to see what assumptions do they want staff to really work off of in building the final budget. Like I said, my recommendation is going to be the cautious approach. I think it's easier to add programs back if we get more money than if money comes in lower than we thought, then you're in a reactionary mode of trying to make reductions in things, and that's not a good place to be. The consequence is, if we cut 20% out and we have to eliminate or reduce certain programs, and then money comes in a lot higher, people say, why do you reduce those programs? We're really in a tough spot this year because of the unknowns. So that's a really big picture of the primary revenues. You know, we're also monitoring, just so you're aware, very closely, you know, the building permit activity, since they pay for a lot of the people in planning. Are permits still coming in to make those payments? Right now it's looking okay, but keeping a close eye on that, because you just don't know what's going to happen to the construction industry and the building permits if money's not circulating through the economy. So with that.
But we're not looking at a recession like we saw in 2008, 2009. This has got a totally different perspective, totally different picture, but it could approach the severity of that if this continues and lingers on and all these businesses are closed for 6 more months or whatever, because the reality is those businesses go away and you don't restart them. When we get out of this, they're just gone. And so those revenues are gone.
Well, and El Dorado County, I mean, this is kind of silly to say this because we always want more sales tax dollars, but you see that the dollar amounts I gave you were really property tax driven in our county. Cities like Placerville, South Lake Tahoe, who are primarily sales tax driven, they're getting hit extremely hard because of this. So that's just something to.
So the other thing I'll mention is a lot of counties have gone to a self-help sales tax provision where they're actually collecting an additional 0.5 cent or whatever. I think it's 1/4% increments, but typically they're 0.5%. So that every transaction where somebody makes a purchase, 0.5 cent of that sales tax or 0.5% of the sales tax goes into an account that then gets used to do dedicated road maintenance and improvements. El Dorado County does not have that. And when we talked about putting it on as a ballot measure, there was a lot of public outcry that everybody's been overtaxed. So the net result of that is you can see the forecast of El Dorado County going into a bigger tailspin than most other adjacent areas in terms of road maintenance. So the city of Folsom will probably be able to maintain the roads for a long time, given our sales tax revenue and the proposition, you know, the sales tax revenue, the self-help tax revenue they collect from that. So, but we are going to diminish in the ability to fund those kinds of things. So we're in a real tough situation, and it's tough to see how getting beyond this year is going to be difficult. But the other thing is, it's been forecast it's a 2 or 3 year problem. It's not a 1 year hiccup. So we got to anticipate what happens in 21, 22 and 22, 23 before we hope to get beyond this and see more of a full recovery. So a lot of compounding effects.
So the last thing I'll bring up is through the CARES Act, counties are receiving a direct allocation from the state to offset the impacts of COVID. So for El Dorado County, we're eligible to receive about $19.7 million. The nuance behind this funding is it all has to be spent by December 30th, and it has to be used to offset the impacts of COVID. So on August 4th, I'm planning to bring an item to the board to set some policy on how those funds should be distributed at a high level. I'll tell you right now, in my mind, as we sit here today, we'll want to offset obviously the cost of county staff, so really public health staff and OES staff who are working on COVID. As we sit here, as of last week, that cost was only in the $1.5 million range. So we're not talking, that's a lot of money, obviously, but it's a drop in the bucket of the 19.7. We are working with education to see what resources they need to get the schools ready. Our business protection group, which is with the chambers and our economic development staff, is working to see what would a small business grant program look like to help our small businesses. You know, one thing that hit me after when I woke up this morning with the governor's announcement that I knew was coming. 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, the governor put all these guidelines in place of how dine-in restaurants had to restructure their services and facility improvements to keep social distancing and things. So that a lot of businesses spent money on that. Well, now they're closed again. So
recouping your money is difficult when there's no revenue.
Right. So we want some money to go for business protection. We're working with the fire districts to see what costs they have. The goal is to spend that 19.7 million bucks and at least keep it in our community, even though it's not necessarily coming directly to county government.
We are considering a broadband option to help fund some design work that would help us ultimately with infrastructure improvements. So there's a lot of things out there. I think we're trying to determine what's the maximum and most effective utilization of those funds, but not revert to giving the money back to the state. So, but there's all kinds of evaluation criteria, and then there's the uncertainty of, well, we might approve that and we might not. So all those kinds of things you have to just kind of weigh in on and take your best shot at it, because ultimately the decision is outside of your control. You know, you can influence, but you can't control it. So.
And I think the schools, in talking to the superintendent of schools, they're having a hard time just because they don't know what schools are going to look like. And if you weren't aware, LA Unified and San Diego school districts today sent a letter to the governor saying they're not planning on opening schools in the fall. That is now, so what's the impact of that on us? Well, now the labor unions, the teachers unions are putting a lot of pressure on the state superintendent to say, don't put our teachers in unquote unsafe working conditions. And that's a whole other offshoot of the challenges we're having now. And the superintendent of schools is working with the health officer to figure out how to best implement that for the 12 or 13 school districts we have in our county. Questions, comments?
Yeah, let's take panelist questions first. Anybody on the leadership team that would like to ask Don a question or make a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Don for all his help. I know he was instrumental in getting us open first, so I just wanted to say thanks again for that, Don. And I guess today was the first day the public counter opened at down at the Community Development Building. So
Building C, yep.
I don't know how long that will last based on our current ever-changing conditions. So, but I just wanted to say thanks to you and your team for making that happen. And I have some personal experience with the voluntary assistance you provided to the local churches. So I just wanted to express my appreciation for that as well. So.
And I think that's one of the watch list counties, they have shut down church participation again, right? So if we're 2 weeks away from that, as best we can forecast, unless we're really able to turn the tide on the confirmed COVID cases, we'll be in the position of having the governor come in and exercise that next round of shutoffs. And the difficulty thing, the most difficult part of talking about COVID confirmed cases is we know the testing has been significantly delayed. People can't get access to testing in a lot of areas. And then furthermore, the lab results are even delayed way beyond what's reasonable. So you can look at 10 days to 2 weeks before you know somebody's been confirmed, who finally got in or was suspected they had a problem and stuff. And by that time, when those numbers hit, that jumps us up over the top of that threshold. So we are at some point going to get a blip. I just hope it doesn't take us over the top, which is one of the reasons why we're emphasizing more outreach, more communication, trying to communicate with our businesses that are still open but not fully compliant with the face mask wearing things to please help us try to avert the shutdown at the next level, because that's even a further compounding situation, and you just get into this death spiral type of thing, and I don't know where it ends until we come out the other side, but it isn't going to be pretty when the state of California comes out the other side. That's an opinion, not fact-based, but it isn't pretty. So any other leadership team comments or questions at this point at Don? Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, Don, are there any variables potential in the governor's budget activity that could further diminish any of our 3 sources of county revenue?
No, not right now.
Okay, thank you.
But that's always subject to change too, because they have talked about other corrections may be necessary. Who knows when? August, September, when the bigger results of this really start to hit, that we may see modified budgets from the state, and some of the monies that are forecast to be received curtailed. So
There are some programmatic policy conversations taking place that one, it's all in the justice system. One is something we will all be voting on in November. It's a referendum to stop bail reform. And it's going to, that ballot measure is going to confuse people. So bail reform was passed by the legislature. A group got enough signatures to try to put a stop to that. It's to be on the November ballot. If it doesn't get recalled, and it will have to be implemented by January 1st, that's going to result in at least 10 more positions in the probation department. And so far, there's been no funding about how those are going to be funded. And then the other one that the governor's office was pushing really hard, but through the efforts of CSAC, the Probation Officers Association, and the Sheriff's Association, what is juvenile justice realignment. Yep. Another type of realignment. They're shifting to counties, and that likely now won't happen until July 1st, but still no funding conversations about what that will look like.
And oh, by the way, we're letting a lot of prisoners out of our jails because of the COVID situation. What does that do in terms of law enforcement demands and phone calls? And so, yeah, it is a very tough situation to try to deal with as a moving target, but we're doing our best, I guess, is the bottom line. Any other questions from the leadership team?
No, this is Michael Anthony. I just want to thank you, Don, for your collaboration with the fire agencies. You guys have been great at the county, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Mike.
Right, and Tim, you got your hand up?
Yeah, it's really a question or more a comment on the TOT. If you're looking at maybe a 40% reduction from 5.3, I know that the TOT funds support a lot of very discretionary activities and that go on in the county. But my real concern is a lot of that, a significant amount of the TOT goes for veteran affairs and veteran activities. And I would hope that you and Supervisor Heidel and his colleagues on the board will find some way, whether it's out of that 19 million you're going to get from the state from the feds, to preserve the very important veteran services that we're providing, because of the men and women who served our country. They really deserve this. Thank you.
Yeah, so you're correct, Tim. So the Veterans Commission, last year, 1920, they received about $265,000. They agreed to give up about 90,000 of that to go to the Veterans Department to add a new position, because the workload in the Veterans Department has been going up. Not surprising, but the condition for the state of the country the past, quite frankly, past 25 years. You know, but so they agreed to do that. So that puts them at about 175. We will be making recommendations to the board next Tuesday of how to manage that. As of Friday, we were going to keep them whole. We'll see where it comes out this week, but we recognize that's a priority of the board and the community. So we can do the best we can.
And one of the things the current board is looking at is the lack of association between what the veterans do and TOT taxes and their original intent. So there's a hard look at, shouldn't that be a different source of funding out of the general fund and not labeled to a TOT commitment? Because right now the TOT funds are highly emphasized in addressing the impacts of tourism, and that's our roads and other things, which that's a change that's been there before. It was promoting tourism and stuff, and we're going to continue some of that, but we also need to look at just addressing the impacts of tourism, which has been ignored largely up to date. But then we've also recognized that some TOT funding needs to go to things like our fair board to support some of the activities they've got going on there. Even though we don't have a fair, that's another sales tax issue and business issue that we're not going to be able to benefit from this year. That could be a very catastrophic type of sequence, because I'm not sure the fair board and our fair operations will come out into next year's time frame with the same funding and the same abilities that we had going into the first part of this year until all this hit. So there's a lot of factors that play into it, but
I'll also add on the TOT, effective July 1st, we entered into a contract with Host Compliance, and they're a company that does more enforcement of TOT, and they really go after unpermitted vacation home rentals. Their analysis, we have about 800 to 900 permitted vacation home rentals in the county. Host Compliance estimates we have another 800 non-permitted. So our treasurer, Karen Coleman, our new treasurer, she's just been outstanding to work with. And she, working with my office, and the board approved it, we added an accountant position to her budget for this year to really go after those lost revenues with Host Compliance. So we get 5.3 million out of the 800 permitted VHRs we have now. Under normal circumstances, maybe that almost doubles with the 800 non-permitted ones. That's probably too aggressive of a assumption, but there's a significant amount of revenue that could be achieved there. She's hoping she can offset those losses, and I think she can. The question is how much do you count on that in a budget? You know, that may or may not come to fruition.
Yep, all tough decisions. So let's turn it over to anybody that's on the phone that would like to raise their hand now for any comments or questions of Dawn relative to our county budget process. Kim, do you see anyone?
Now accepting public comment from Joel Wiley.
Hi, Joel.
Hi there, Joel Wiley, El Dorado Hills. I was listening to you talk about things like we're getting sales tax from Amazon.com. And I was wondering if you get them from Costco.com.
Yeah, all online sales. I think it's called the Wayfair Act or something. So all online sales now, the counties benefit more than we did prior to that, was a year or two ago.
Amazon was the first one that settled an agreement to do that, and a lot of the other online companies, the large ones and stuff, have agreed to it. But for instance, I don't know that eBay is on it. So there are some large ones that I don't think we're capturing yet, but as much as possible, we're trying to close that loop for those online sales. But the biggest escape when the stores are open and things are normal, obviously, is people just walking in and filling their cart up, walking out and leaving the sales tax in the city of Folsom. That's one of my key frustrations. And for Don, since he lives in the north end of the county, close to Placer County, that's the other drain. And there you go to Tahoe, they go over the hill into Nevada and go to the Costco's over there. So El Dorado County is really hurting from the standpoint of we don't have those kinds of facilities and generate that kind of sales tax locally. So hopefully that will change sometime here in the near future.
Well, that would, if you get it from Costco.com, that would tide us over till we get a physical Costco here. I did have one other question, and it's just an idle one. what percentage of sales tax comes from restaurants? Do you have any idea?
I don't know the percentage. I do know the industry that generates most of our sales tax in El Dorado County is gasoline. That has been that way in this county for at least 10 years, and it's by far the largest sales tax generator that we have. I don't know what percentage from restaurants, Joel.
Okay, just curious.
But the other thing to note there is tribes are exempt from the requirements to pay normal sales tax to the state. So if you don't have an agreement, and I'm not sure we do have an agreement. So for those agencies that don't have an agreement with the local tribes and stuff, they're not getting the benefit of those sales taxes. I know the Rancheria opened up the gas station, and it is a very popular place. I drive by it every time I come up here to the county, and every time I go home, and it's typically on the weekends in the summertime, it's booked.
It is now in our top 10 of sales tax generators.
Yep. So gasoline tax is important, and that's a contributor to it. So
the other big one over the past couple of years was the ARCO that opened in El Dorado Hills. Is it AM PM?
Right.
Yeah, right. That's one of our largest sales tax generators as well.
Right. So those are helpful from the standpoint of there was a lot of public opposition to the ARCO going in El Dorado Hills, but I think after it was all said and done, the designs were done, the traffic situations were mitigated as much as possible. There is definitely a net benefit to El Dorado County for having that ARCO, which is a very popular gas station since they have the lowest typical cash price of anybody around, because there's a lot of traffic that goes back and forth, boats, motorhomes, and so that's helping us now, where in the past that was all revenue that went to the city of Folsom or someplace else. So, okay, anyone else online that would like to comment or ask a question of Dawn?
There's no additional public comment.
Okay, with that, I'd like to thank you again for your time and all the good data and stuff, and we'll have more discussions on it. I would encourage people to tune into the Board of Supervisors meetings when we talk budget stuff. July 21st is the next one that's significant, but it's something that we all need to look at. How do we try to manage this? Because if it was a personal budgeting situation and you looked at, okay, one of the revenue streams you've had got reduced by, let's just pick a number, 15%, how are you going to balance your current expenditures against that lack of revenue? And you typically have to make decisions not to go out to restaurants as much, not to travel as much, not to spend as much on your vacation, not to spend as much on Christmas presents, whatever it may be. And the county's faced with the same kind of decisions. What services do we cut back to try to make all this balance? And ultimately, that affects people, because you end up with reductions in force if it's anywhere near what we saw in 2008, 2009. And that was horrific in terms of the number of people that got laid off by the county and had to go try to find other employment during a real bad recession. So as much as possible, we all need to try to find the most effective way to avoid those things and be very communicative on where people stand in terms of priorities. So yeah, a lot more to come certainly, and I think the September meeting is it when we're going to actually set the final budget.
Yeah, so I have the meeting July 21st. By October 2nd, counties have to have an adopted budget in place. So September is going to be the month where the decisions are actually made.
All right, very good. So thanks again,
All right,
Don. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Don.
Relieve you to have some time to go home and spend it with your family, hopefully, so, before it turns totally dark. So, yep. All right, so with that, I'm going to move on to our second item 4. I don't know how we ended up with 2 item 4s, but the supervisor communications, and I'm going to try to be brief with these. The COVID-19 reopening setbacks, we just heard with the governor's announcement yesterday, some of the effects that's going to have. And so I'm not going to belabor that. The public health officer has not put out any new directives, but we have at the last special meeting, the board had addressed some of the things going on in Tahoe to try to reduce the amount of infection that's going on there. And one of those things is to increase the efforts of our environmental management organization, which has the ability to enforce any establishment that sells food or alcohol. And so with the governor's closing all the bars and the restaurants, that preempts those activities up there. But in certain other areas, it doesn't. So Outdoor seating for restaurants is still open. That's what we're trying to maximize and encourage. So I'm not trying to say restaurants are closing, but the indoor seating, the indoor dining is being shut off by the governor. So there are other alternatives, curbside pickup, outdoor, et cetera. But there really is very little additional things the county has imposed on at this point, other than engaging environmental management to a higher level and trying to put out a lot of notifications, awareness. We've got a campaign going on locally in El Dorado Hills to try to put and encourage signage within those business establishments that are not fully complying now with the wearing the face masks, but we're trying to do that in a kind and gentle manner. We're putting together a letter in conjunction with the chamber, and Glenn has been involved with this, trying to put together some simple signage that will be available to businesses so they can actually select which signage they want, but to let them know that the county is here to help them accomplish conformity, consistency with the orders, and not to fight things or not to have to be the police. We're willing to step up and try to help, but again, our sheriff has come out and said he will not do anything to enforce these measures at this point in time, at least. So it's left up to other resources within the county to try to do what we can to curb the tide, so we don't end up being in this watch list category that we may end up in anyway. So that's the effort on that. I'm going to leave it at that. COVID-19 testing statewide delays in getting results. We mentioned that already. There's as much as like a 2-week lag in terms of somebody not feeling good, being able to get into and get tested, and then being able to get the results back. So a lot of the results we're going to be seeing over the next couple of weeks are already historical for the most measure. So that's going to be tough. Vegetation management enforcement in El Dorado Hills has increased. I want to thank again the fire department for posting the signs on the vacant lots. I think that did a large measure of trying to get that cleanup done. And I've seen some very positive results, as opposed to not only sending out the letters, but posting the signage saying this is a property that needs to be compliant with the El Dorado Hills Fire Department's resolution, I think it is, but to maintain that on a forcible space. But the fire department has also been very helpful with the county, working together to try to get enforcement for those occupied lots that we believe are high risk. And again, most of it's complaint based, but I want to thank Chief Lilly and the staff of the fire department for doing what they can to help the county do the enforcement on that, because it takes everybody's hands to do the best we can. Green Valley Road expansion, I think everybody, at least that lives off of Green Valley Road, recognized that. Opened up on July 4th. It was a great project. The city of Folsom, I think, did a wonderful job in terms of the design and implementation. It came a little bit later than most of us wanted, but it actually came earlier than their schedule for opening. But I think that's a huge benefit to the residents and the businesses in El Dorado Hills to not have that bottleneck there associated, and the safety issues associated with it on Green Valley Road. So I just want to acknowledge that. And then the last thing I had, and I'm going to open up for any additional comments, is an email that we received recently that El Dorado Hills has been nationally recognized as one of the most budget-friendly cities for renters. So my first response to this, well, El Dorado Hills isn't a city, so how do we qualify under that category? But we've seen other national surveys done where we're categorized as a city when we're not. But I do think it's encouraging that at least to know that the rents in El Dorado County are not going up at the same rates, and particularly this is El Dorado Hills, so El Dorado Hills are not going up the same rates as they are in other areas. I guess that's the comparison that is favorable. I know our economic development lead, Kyle Zimberman, is aware of all that, and other people have noted as well. So that's just as a commentary. We keep getting national recognition. What a wonderful place El Dorado Hills is to live, and how we have low rents. And so I'm anticipating even more interest of people relocating to El Dorado Hills, which helps keep the property tax up, because when you turn over those properties, as I understand it, property sales, at least in El Dorado Hills, are at very good levels, high levels compared to some other areas. And so that benefits us in terms of being able to maintain that 3.5%, 4%, hopefully getting back to 5% annual increase in property tax revenue. So, and recognizing that El Dorado Hills has 85% of the growth, at least as recorded by the analysts that did it in the last 5 years. That's where the the new houses are being built. It's where a lot of the new commercial properties being built. So that's the things that I think that we need to recognize and be aware of as being El Dorado Hills residents. So with that, I'll leave it at that kind of high summary. If anybody has any comments or questions on either of those or anything else they'd like to ask me, I'll open up now to the panelists. First of all, anybody on our leadership team who would like to add to the conversation? Okay, I'm not seeing any hand raised or anything else. Oh, I'm sorry, Glenn, go ahead.
I would. I'll raise my hand. And to kind of piggyback onto what you were talking about, from an economic and community development standpoint, and everything that we're hearing about the coronavirus, it all seems to lead back to our economy. And what we're learning from opening up our communities is our infection rates are increasing. And so that's why the governor is now closing things back down, and we need to keep the infection rates low. One of the ways we know now, and this is ever changing, we're only 4 months into all of this analysis that we've been learning from dealing with this coronavirus, is that masks help and washing your hands help. And I've been working with Supervisor Heidel, Debbie Manning from the El Dorado Hills Chamber on coordinating an effort to communicate that to all of the business owners, whether it's a retail business dealing with the public or you're an employer here in town and you have employees that come into your building. We need them to be working. We need the businesses to be open. We need the employees to have a place to go to work. And we know by wearing masks right now, that can help. And so we need to encourage that. So we are going to be getting posters created, hopefully within a few days, make them available at multiple locations for pickup through the county, get a letter out to business owners explaining to them how they need to support this. So we're all in this together. We need to work with what we have, and as Don was talking about, and their numbers change every week. I don't think I could sleep at night if I had his job. So we need to work with what we know. And what we know is we need to share this virus less. And this virus is evil and smart and creative, and it's almost like it was created to cause havoc. So we need to be better than the virus. We need to protect each other. We need to wear masks. It's very simple. So that is.
Thank you, Glenn. And the other two important things are social distancing, which we all know. And the other thing is outdoor activities are highly favorable because the virus doesn't survive, particularly with the weather we're having right now, very long in an outdoor environment. So we're trying to maximize outdoor seating at restaurants, outdoor activities, those kinds of things, because those are the safest way to do things. So we need to emphasize and try to go that
as best
that
we
extra
know. But not to step on that, but there is a lot of indoor activities that go on. People are working indoors. We have our retail businesses indoors. So, and with all of this heat, people are inside. And if we want to be outside and enjoy the outdoors, which is great in our county, and the outdoor eating and things like that, if we want to continue to have that comfort in our lives, we really need to be careful around others, be careful indoors, and just protect each other.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Glenn. Is there anybody, Kim, that has raised their hand from the public's perspective that I can't see that would like to comment or ask a question?
Yes. Now accepting public comment from Wendy Mae Davis.
Wendy.
Sir, I just wanted to thank you so much for all that you do. And I just have to say, Sita did say all that there really was to say. And Tim, thank you very much for the suggestion on the lineup of tow trucks, even though it sounds like we need the money that we might be getting from the ticketing and towing of these vehicles. I think if they were there, whether it was their parents' vehicles or their own, if they saw that lineup of trucks, they'd leave. So it affects my family, and I hear those voices, and I've been there and seen it. And I just, first and foremost, appreciate you for what you do, and Tim for what you said. And thank you for this meeting. It was fantastic.
Thank you. Anybody else, Kim?
There's no additional public comment.
Very good. So let's move on to item 5, our team progress reports, and let's start out with public safety. Officer Brown, are you still on? Do you want to add anything based upon your monthly reports and stuff that we haven't already commented on?
Yeah, sure. Thanks again for having me. And this is I love this conversation about Calathea Park and Heaven, and hopefully this becomes more the neighbors become a little more aware of the issues going on. So I love it. So we're because of COVID, our office is still the same as it was last meeting. Nothing's changed there. They've released some DUI funding for enforcement from checkpoints to go to roving enforcement. So we'll be conducting that, and before the end of September, that's when our grant year ends. So you'll be seeing us out there, hopefully a lot more than you were in the past. So we'll be getting a lot of overtime hours out there for officers for DUI enforcement. As you know, the DUI continues even today. COVID doesn't keep people from doing that. A big thanks to County Roads on I'll probably pronounce it right, Housley Circle. Is that right, Supervisor Heidel?
Housley Circle? I'm not familiar with what that is.
So it's a circle that comes out of, it's a nice exit route for Promontory residents. So hopefully there's some Promontory residents listening.
Okay.
Nice exit for Promontory residents, come out and then go through Governor's Village and out to Wilson and El Dorado Hills Boulevard. So there was speeding issues going on there. Neighbors got together. They knew who to call. They called us and they called the county. And we went out there pretty much almost the next day or the day after, did some surveying with the county. Like I said, all led by the county. They're the ones that get out there. They're the ones that stab those signs in the ground. So we got some 25-mile-an-hour speed limit signs out there, or they're coming for sure. So that's great. But that's just an example of, call the stakeholders that are actually, can make that difference for you. Next door and Facebook often doesn't do it. If you post onto Idiot Drivers of El Dorado County, it doesn't do anything for you. It's cathartic. It might help your heart, but it's not going to help the enforcement. So please let us know the issues that you have, because we need to know. That's about it.
Thank you, Andrew. Do you want to offer the numbers people should call again in case somebody joined the meeting a little bit late in terms of getting a hold of the CHP?
Yeah, me personally. So my name's Andrew Brown. I'm the Public Information Officer, and we'll wear a lot of hats though. So our office though, if you want to get in touch with me Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 to discuss an issue, 530-748-2450. If there's an active incident that's not an emergency, obviously emergencies call 911. But if it's not an emergency, you can call area code 916-861-1300, and that'll get you in touch with our dispatch center for an issue that you need an officer out there. And we're good and responsive on our good folks in El Dorado Hills.
Thank you. We much appreciate that.
Yeah.
I guess, Kim, do you see any representation from the sheriff's office? I can't tell if somebody joined us late or not. Typically, it's Troy Morton.
No, I do not.
Okay, so let's move then to Chief Lilly again, relative to what's going on with the fire department, recent fires, and all the strike teams that are happening across the state and all the other stuff. So, Chief.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, we've seen with the weather heating up, and I know everyone's felt it for sure, we've definitely had the vegetation fires increasing. Really, though, I think we're doing really well. We have a good vegetation management program. We're working with the county, and that's all going well. We are getting ready to abate some of our non-compliant lots. So there's about 30 of them, I believe, that we're going to force abatement on here coming up shortly, and that'll, again, continue to reduce the risk. So definitely getting busier, though, with the heat, especially as the vegetation fires. And I guess the reminder is just to get everyone out there to be safe and be careful, and remember how dry that grass is now. It's ready to burn for sure. The other thing we did send a strike team to Nevada. They were gone for about 4 days. There was a significant fire there. They did some good work, but we encountered some very interesting challenges with COVID. So that's definitely something that's impacting us, even on that strike team wildfire remote setting. We're trying to adapt and come up with some strategies to make it safer. Other than that, it's really been business as usual, as well as managing the uptick in the COVID cases in our community. There definitely is a rise there, and it's already been well said and well broadcasted, but we are seeing the patients that need to be served and trying to help them out. And it's a much more dangerous environment for our crews. So we're taking every precaution, and we're doing very well.
Thank you, Chief. And are you aware that Kyle Zimmelman is acquiring a lot of PPE from the state, 22 pallets worth? So it's face masks and other things, and we're going to just try to, and Kyle leads the economic development effort, but we're going to try to be able to distribute that to various, including the businesses, to try to help them enforce, the wear the mask at the door, put it on, etc. If you don't have one, here's one you can use. But if you are aware of any needs for PPE along those lines, the county is going to be getting a lot of it here coming from the state, I guess, and they think it's about a week away from arriving. We just have to find a place to store it, is what I understand, and then the normal transportation. But if you're aware of any of those kinds of needs, because again, I think that's one of the key things that keeps our first responders operating and obviously helps with businesses, et cetera, is having an adequate supply of that PPE.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. We are at the moment doing well on PPE, but that's the critical element, and knowing that there's some other resources is appreciated.
Okay, so with that, I think we're, any comment for our public safety members here? Any panelists comments or questions at this point? Okay, Kim, anybody who's raised their hand from the call-in members or people I can't see on the screen weren't panelists?
There's no public comment.
Okay, so let's move through then the next series of leadership team reports. Is there anyone who would like to take the lead on this? I'll take a hand up. Who wants to start? All right, so I'm going to pick one, economic development. Glenn, why don't you go ahead and run with that one? And, we are talking about the community choice aggregation thing, so as much as you can, give us an update on that.
I can give a little bit update on that. I've kind of spoken my piece a little bit. Everything, I think that relates to our county and protecting our government relates to keeping everybody safe. So we've talked about that. As far as community choice aggregation, that is a program that's been throughout California that many California residents are under right now, which basically allows communities to purchase their own electricity. They still utilize their legacy utility company for SPG&E to deliver the electricity, to do the billing, to do a lot of services like that, but it gives you more flexibility on how you source electricity as far as mixing new and renewables. It also allows you to be better positioned as things will be changing and developing. We know in purchasing and delivering electricity, we know a lot of people will be making their own, obviously with solar. So it's a stepping point. In my best estimate, 20, 25 years, I think we will still be dealing with major utility companies, but we will start to see more people getting more power from the sun. And this is kind of a temporary solution, but I think it will also help us bridge to being more energy independent than dependent on these big mega electricity producers. So a lot of counties are doing it, cities are doing it throughout the state. There's been disputes with the Public Utilities Commission on how much they support this and with fees, but it seems every time there's a challenge by one of the big energy producers in our state, these local entities still seem to be plugging along and doing really well. So it's an opportunity to control your costs. It's an opportunity to identify your mix of energy, renewables, and other sources of energy, and it better positions, I think, communities for dealing with electricity in the future. There's been some discussion on and off. It is part of the strategic plan for the county. We do have many other issues that we have to deal with right now, so I'm not sure how much of a priority it will be, but it is something that we need to keep our finger on and know is out there.
Let me update you on the priority. There's actually an item on tomorrow's agenda for the Board of Supervisors to establish an ad hoc committee to move forward. Pioneer Power has shown a lot of interest lately, I guess, in interacting with it. This is coming from Don Ashton. I haven't talked to him personally. So we're hopefully going to establish an ad hoc committee of the board. I hope to be able to serve on that along with one other board member, and then start the formal discussions, hopefully, with Placer County, which is Pioneer Power, and the cities that participate within Placer County on that same CCA. They've got a very well-established, good-going program. They're our adjacent neighbor. We have similarities with what happens in Tahoe because Liberty Power serves our South Lake Tahoe area. Placer County has the same kind of thing. They're going through all those transitions. So to me, the easiest and most expedient way for us to be part of this without having to create something on our own is to join in a partnership with Pioneer Power in Placer County and the cities over there. And it sounds like they're very open to those kinds of discussions, maybe driven by PG&E's efforts, obviously going through the bankruptcy claims and all the other stuff. But I'm really hopeful that we can get into some earnest discussion about how El Dorado County and the city of Placerville, the city of Placerville is interested as well. So we're working it collaboratively, hopefully with Pioneer Power, to see if we can open those doors and establish an agreement and move in that direction. So that's the latest that's happened, and the board will make that decision tomorrow whether or not we establish an ad hoc committee. But I fully support it. I think it's one of the few things that's readily available to us to try to minimize our electric costs, because that power supply will only increase, in my opinion, with PG&E and the bankruptcy and other stuff, as opposed to other sources, which is what the CCA is really all about, is getting the most affordable, low-cost sources of the power to go through the PG&E infrastructure, distribution systems, et cetera. Maintenance still has to be done by PG&E, but Pioneer Power, for instance, has been able to demonstrate like a 10% overall rate reduction. That may have changed in the last 6 months, but that was the last number I knew was reported. So there is a benefit to it. It's not saving 0 or saving 1%. It's more significant than that if it's done right, and they seem to know how to do it right. So that's where we are.
And they are one of the newer CCAs. They've been around about 2 years, and that was one of CDAC's recommendation, was to try to work with them as best we can, being they're our neighbor, and they've done a lot of the investment and put a lot of the work together. And I'm glad that they're hopefully open to talking to us.
And I don't think we'd be discussing it today if CDAC hadn't taken that on. So my thanks to you and to CDAC, because you chaired that CDAC subcommittee, for really getting that elevated, aware, visible. And I think we're on the road to really starting to get something to happen there. So all good news.
Good.
All right, so infrastructure. John, you want to, I asked you to talk about roundabout options just because we had recent discussion with a DOT director, Rafael Martinez, on that, but feel free to talk about anything else you'd like to relative to, obviously, the Planning Commission hearings, et cetera. But infrastructure is kind of the emphasis as opposed to development improvements that don't include infrastructure. But go ahead.
Yeah, we had talked to Rafael specifically about Francisco and El Dorado Hills Boulevard. If some of you probably remember, we have Brittany Way, which dead ends within the subdivision there. Brittany Place comes out just south of the intersection, but that's a private road. So we were educating Rafael, because he doesn't have the history on it, that you have, you got the Wild Oaks Park right there at that corner.
Yep.
And the plan was to take Brittany Way and take it out to that intersection. But you have, if you total up the continuation of Francisco over to the school, as well as the frontage road along the other side of the park, along the subdivision there, you have a total of 6 legs. And I tend to argue with Supervisor Heidel at times on certain applications for roundabouts, but we'll leave that alone.
It's healthy discussion. It's not arguments.
Yeah, discussion.
Constructive dialogue.
And but that would be, and we talked to Rafael because, with the concerns of our capacity issues, like say El Dorado Hills Boulevard, that leg, when they completed that free right, which was a great improvement that DOT did, they said that they had fixed the problem, but they only fixed half of the problem, because you still got the left turn movement going from El Dorado Hills Boulevard to Francisco in the evening, which backs up pretty significantly. So we strongly encourage Rafael to seriously consider that, because that would give you some latent capacity and delay the need for 4 lanes on El Dorado Hills Boulevard, because you keep the traffic flowing through there. So that was one specific, discussion concerning that. As a
let me add, the emphasis is because there's state grant monies that favor roundabout construction more so than ever before. So that's one of the reasons why it's a limited time. We need to get our stake in the ground and start applying for those grants, and hopefully we'll bring some of that money back to El Dorado Hills.
Yeah, Caltrans is not in the business of capacity improvements at this point. It's roundabouts, it's bike lanes, it's other type of pedestrian facilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And transit, yeah, multimodal, right? So
Multimodal, yeah.
So nothing else that jumps out at me unless anyone has any questions.
Talk about the roundabout at Bridalwood a little bit too, because I know some people, John Davey is familiar with that. We had a discussion with the CSD trying to get them engaged, at least I did recently. So you want to just cover that one real quick?
Sure. Yeah, we had, and I thought it was a great option, you know, with the approval of Serrano J7, that, you know, a lot of people who lived in the Bridalwood, you know, had expressed concerns with getting out of that intersection with the increased traffic and so forth on Bass Lake Road. And so DOT suggested, you know, a roundabout in which Parker Development could participate, as well as the residents, as well as potentially the CSD and the county, to make that happen. And that, I would think, with the future park that will go there from the CSD, would be a great access point for them as well. So I thought, and that, you know, helps regulate traffic speeds, helps slows people down a little bit coming in and out of the traffic circle. So that's, you know, another discussion. I don't know where that's going to go, but I think that was a great option for a potential solution there.
There's another location that's being looked at in conjunction with that, Silver Springs Parkway, in that intersection, although it's kind of coming too late from standpoint, the county already got right of way. That discussion should have happened a long time ago, but now it seems to be surfacing a little bit.
Well,
So
I think that may be more challenging there because they went through eminent domain to get that right of way, and you're going to need more right of way if you put a roundabout in there. So
Right, in both the projects we talked about, the CSD owns property adjacent to there in terms of with next to Bass Lake, they've allocated a right-of-way dedication to put in the roundabout or an entryway or something there, so it's not going to cost the county tremendous amounts of money. With respect to Wild Oak Park, I'm sure the CSD would work with us. That's pretty much a passive park for the most part, and that segment of it doesn't get used a lot, so I think, again, it would be an easy thing to accommodate without having to go through eminent domain and huge costs to the county to try to make those improvements. So yeah, I think those are all in the right direction.
Yeah, we'll see how it develops. And we met at the Planning Commission last week, and one of our major tasks was we made a lot of revisions to the land division ordinance and so forth. I don't bore you any details and so forth. So we made a lot of, and one of the more significant ones was the addition of design standards for drive-throughs. So with the struggles we've had recently, on which I won't mention, on some of the standards that we had prior to that, which we really didn't have any, we had to borrow from Cameron Park's design standards. So that's certainly a step in the right direction, along with a lot of other changes and so forth. So.
And an emphasis on more review time. I know APAC has been always interested in getting more review time. That was discussed thoroughly. There have been suggestions made to the planning department. We'll see how those come back. But I think it's really getting into a much better situation in terms of trying to make things transparent, trying to allow sufficient time to do things, and making the changes in many cases that are long overdue. They're just kind of common sense definitions that should have been in there that, you know, at the time they were written weren't considered. So.
Right. Yeah, and staff was very, the way they laid it out was very easy to follow. You know, they laid it out very well for us to track, and they were very, very amenable to the modifications. So.
Very good. So any comments from our panelist group of John on the infrastructure part?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. On the roundabouts, I was curious about the grant funding sources, because we know the state's challenge right now with income. If there's any expectation those sort of grants will disappear, because I know that a lot of the basis of our TIMFI program was based on grant availability, and they just don't exist anymore. And so when I talked to Rafaela specifically about the Bridalwood roundabout, you know, that was proposed, and actually we proposed it to him, and then he asked, say, what do you think about a roundabout? So when we talked about it, he was saying, you know, that it's a good opportunity. It would require some buy-in from the residents, specifically at Bridalwood, because I think the DOT sees it as a Bridalwood resident problem, whereas I think the most of our community sees it as a Bass Lake problem or challenge. But after the vote at the board, and it was settled that, you know, hey, they would reach out to residents at Bridalwood to chip in to seed funding for the roundabout to get the grant, along with I believe 200,000 from Parker Development. Then when we talked to Raphael, he said, hey, it's probably not happening this year. It's down the road. We were trying to keep the community engaged. Consequently, that community is not engaged now, and I would suspect that most of them are against any sort of self-assessment. I've talked to 36 owners in Bridlewood. 6 said yes, 30 said no. There's I think just under 400 houses there, so that's pretty. It's 10% representative.
Well, I'm hoping that the CSD will see the benefit for and will participate in that process.
Well, I think it's an elegant solution to based on what's available. So I encourage those people to look at it and really get an idea. Hey, what are the options? What else could be solved with what's available? And there's not much. So
I do know that Raphael's committed to talking with the CSD very near term to try to get all their inputs. He was kind of thinking that's further out. We said, no, it needs to be addressed now. I mean, the timing is such that you've got some interest expressed. With time, it'll wane and go away. The follow-up to that needs to be with the Bridlewood Homeowners Association, which he promised to have a meeting to do that. And that also needs to happen. So I think Raphael understands it's got to get done sooner rather than just pushing it off.
And that was the initial, that board, the way it was framed before the vote occurred at the BOS, seemed very receptive to it, even though, the community sees it as a Bridlewood problem. They thought it was an opportunity for their residents to solve a problem. But after the vote took place and they knew kind of the numbers of the contribution by other parties, they were a bit dissatisfied. So that got sideways real quick, and I asked Raphael to be engaged on that. And,
so we just need to all keep talking to him. I think he got the message when John and I talked to him that that's got to be very high in his list for El Dorado Hills project.
I would love that to be a community contribution as opposed to specifically at Bridlewood, but the more you expand it out to more voters, the more opposition you probably run into. It's just the unfortunate part of it right now.
Right.
Well, and I'll be talking to Raphael again tomorrow, and I'll talk to him one more time about that.
They're doing, they have a lot of grading going on at J7. They've lifted the dirt quite high, so they're underway. So eventually, that's going to be a challenge sooner rather than later.
And one of these days we'll get the Bass Lake improvements opened up too, right? So that's one of the things we didn't talk about infrastructure, but that's moving right along and making good progress. From
I talked to Rich at the beginning of the month, and Silver Springs is pretty imminent. They have the markers out right now for the right of way and everything, and that he expects, the Bass Lake, the detour to be removed by the end of July.
Yeah.
So if you haven't heard, Rich submitted his resignation. Rich submitted his resignation. He's now going to go to work for DWR, California Department of Water Resources.
Wow.
And presumably he's mentored people in DOT to pick that up and stuff, but I think that's a significant loss to our department. But for Rich, he's getting a raise and he's getting better benefits. So
I'm going to need a few phone numbers. So
He's here till Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, move quickly, John, if you're going to try to get him. That's why I wanted to raise it tonight.
He's safe. He's keeping the same phone number you told me. Same salary.
Okay,
And
that's good to know.
it looks like pavement's about ready to go down on Bass Lake, right at Country Club. So looks like to me.
End of July, it's supposed to be done.
Yeah, they're moving right along, and I think that roadway is going to be hugely improved once it opens up, and everybody, I think it's going to be like Saratoga Way opening up. People are going to start to recognize, wow, what a difference. And Green Valley Road, the same kind of thing. We're finally starting to see some really significant improvements in our circulation in El Dorado Hills. So, hooray.
I do see Alan Priest has his hand up, but before we get to that, I will also mention that with the opening of the Santa Rosa Shopping Center, there's a lot of weird left turns going on, even out of Hawkview, where they're reconstructing that left turn barrier at their entrance on Bass Lake Road. There's a lot of people got to get used to that. It's not the free-flowing road it was. So
very good. So before we go to Alan, any more panelists, comments, or questions of John? Okay, Kim, if you could open up Alan Priest's line, I would like to get his inputs, and then anybody else who's on the line who has their hand raised.
Accepting public comment from Alan Priest.
And I'll keep this really quick. I was interested in the Bass Lake conversation, obviously. I just wanted to express that I can't speak for the entire board, but pretty much our board was very excited about the roundabout concept. And when Kevin last talked with Raphael, I want to say 3 weeks ago, Raphael made it very clear that that's a non-starter, never going to happen. So we were pretty disappointed about it. So if there can be additional traction, if we can find some funds, CSD, I guarantee, as part of our park development costs there would chip in for a roundabout access or some kind of spur off that roundabout. We were very excited about that opportunity and not really too excited about trying to come off Springs Road coming down from the north. Yeah, exactly. So we were excited about it. So if there can be more traction, we're all in. The only other one on Wild Oaks Park, that parcel is the only one that we have is it's subject to a voter-approved, owner-approved bond in that area. So it wouldn't be probably a CSD decision without input from the property owners, because years ago we took out a bond to keep that park intact as an open space. So there might be just a little nuance to that decision-making process, but certainly consider us a partner if we can help out in getting access there for a roadway. And that's it.
Good to know. Thank you, Al. Anybody else have a comment on this? Kim, is there anybody on the line who has their hand raised that I can't see?
There's no additional public comment.
Okay, so given the hour, let's keep moving here. I'd like to move, we'll just go kind of down through the order. Good governance. So Richard.
Okay, very briefly. The conditions that everybody is living through right now are unsettling for everybody. And so trying to pay attention to what's going on other things in government, particularly when government is having to tinker with what we consider the old status quo just to go forward under our new circumstances. I think it is going to be more difficult to get information out to the public, maybe timely or informatively. So we appreciate what has to be done and what is going on, and maybe just think about that a little bit with these kind of pressures being put on the decision makers. So I think that's kind of just an overview observation. Just a second thing that came to my attention, and maybe it's just noteworthy of comment. I see that the county has just signed a MOU with the Operating Engineers Local Union 3. Yep. And one of the significant things in it, it seems to minimize the previous role of the Civil Service Commission in resolving undisputed or disputed matters on personnel. And it seems to defer now to arbitration rather than the Civil Service Commission to resolve grievances. And it seems to be something of a bit of a new policy. I won't say policy shift, because candidly, I don't know if it's been applied in other contracts already or not. But apparently both parties, the county and the union, saw some benefit of minimizing the role of the Civil Service Commission. So just an observation.
Thanks for that, because that hadn't come to my attention at all. And I don't think that was the intent of the board in any of the discussions I was in. So I'm not sure if it's an interpretation thing or if there was a willful intent to make changes there, but that was never any part of any discussion I was involved with. So,
well, Mr. Veerkamp signed off June 30th, and the last several sections in it clearly set the course for final resolution and going to the judicial board panel, mediation panel for resolution. So if the Board of Supervisors has deferred or authorized the approval of this contract to one supervisor, we seem to have achieved that change.
Well, there's a board item. I'm trying to remember if it's tomorrow's meeting or we just had agenda review for July 21st, but in one of those two meetings, either tomorrow or July 21st, there is a consent item to approve that action. I think it's tomorrow's meeting. So if you wanted to weigh in on that, Richard, I would much appreciate it, because during our discussion of consent calendar items, if you weighed in and raised that question, then I can easily ask that we have more discussion on it. Okay. So that would be very helpful because I don't have the backdrop on it. I didn't read through all the documents, but that was not something that was brought to me as a change. So yeah, give that consideration if you would.
Now, that's at the next board meeting?
I think it's at tomorrow's meeting. I don't have the agenda right in front of me, but
Under consent.
it's a consent item, I believe, on tomorrow's meeting agenda. So it's going to be within the first 18 or 19. I don't know. Kim, do you have the agenda handy by any chance for tomorrow's meeting? Do you remember that consent item?
I'm sorry, I don't have it with me.
Okay. I'm sure John Davies probably looking it up because
I'm looking at it right now, but it's agenda item number 8.
Agenda item 8. There you go. I knew it.
Okay. Well,
So yeah,
question. I will do that.
Yeah, take a look at that, and that would be the appropriate time to bring it up before the board approves it, because that, like I said, has not surfaced in any discussions I've been involved with. So appreciate that.
Okay.
Any comments from any of our leadership team for Richard? Okay, no hands up that I see. Anyone on the line, Kim, that I can't see that might have their hand up at this point?
There's no public comment.
Okay, so let's move to APAC. I'll cover health and communities last, but let's move to APAC. So, John.
Really, it's just a recap. We had our July meeting virtually last Wednesday, and if you weren't there, why weren't you? We had 2 items on our agenda. It was the Heritage at Carson Creek project by Lennar. It's basically they're asking to for about 450 age-restricted residential units, a community center, some commercial, very little commercial and open spaces south of their existing heritage product. It's a specific plan amendment because that specific plan had envisioned some R&D and some industrial in that area, and there's no demand for it. The big calling card for them is that it's half the traffic impact if they switch it to the age-restricted communities. It's very early on in their process. They do have applications going in at the county. We'll be talking more about that in the next several weeks or months. The second item was the Montana de El Dorado Phase 2. The applicant was kind enough to join us again. We had about 40 people attending virtually for the meeting for that. We had a long discussion about it. He's very engaged with the community, and he seems to want to provide common sense resolutions that work for both his project and for residents that are adjacent to that. And, I think that our subcommittee, I had an email this afternoon that they want to wrap up their comments, and we're probably going to have a virtual APAC meeting for just voting members of APAC. My goal is by midweek next week to have that done so that we can have those observations and those comments submitted formally before the comment period ends on the project, which is on July 28th. And other than that, our next meeting is August 12th, and I imagine it will be virtual as well. And I will say it's a lot easier to have somebody else driving the meeting, thank you, Kim, than it is to try to conduct a meeting and drive Zoom at the same time. So look forward to seeing everybody on August 12th.
Thank you, John. Any questions from our leadership team of John? Okay, not seeing any hands up. Kim, is there anybody on the line that's got a hand up?
No, there's no public comment.
Okay, so let's move into community information and outreach. So Cindy.
Okay. Mainly what we've been doing is trying to keep up with all the most up-to-date information on COVID and what is happening. Carla Hass also does a very good job of putting information up on that. One of the things we haven't gone over is the COVID testing. There's going to be a new testing starting tomorrow at the El Dorado County Fairgrounds. It's from 10 to 1 tomorrow. And then going forward, it will be every Tuesday from 9 to 1.
So it's a mobile testing. They're moving it all over in different places, and we get them every Tuesday at the fairgrounds.
Yes, because our the place at Ponderosa High School was closed down. So we do have an option for that, but you do have to be over 18. You have to make an appointment, but that is now available on the West Slope because currently the only state-run facility is in Tyler. So. Oh, and CVS, but I don't know. I heard
they're not state-run.
Yeah,
that's a private.
Another place to get some testing. And then we've been deciding they put out guidelines for face coverings and things like that. We've been trying to keep people as informed as possible. But if there's things that you would like more information on, or that maybe we're lacking on that you would like us to provide, please let it either email or call us and let us know. Something like that.
I'll give you a heads up. Glenn and I have been working with Debbie Manning relative to what we need to do to try to make the face mask requirements more visible to businesses and promote that. So we're definitely going to be asking for your help to put out on my Facebook and my Nextdoor accounts that information once we've got it, because we talked about doing that as many different ways as possible, having individuals do it, but certainly the agency accounts need to be a big part of that. So, and Glenn, I believe that we're in the process already of purchasing posters for that, right? So we're moving out, we're trying to get things done, and we hope that's going to be a leader situation for what El Dorado County is trying to do kind of in parallel. But we think that by working with the chamber as opposed to county resources, we can move quicker, get the initial work done, get county to reimburse it, and have more impact than delaying it for a couple of weeks, which is what I'm suspecting will happen with the rest of the county. And by that time, it may almost be too late. So, Glenn, do you have anything to add on that? Looks maybe he's left. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. All right. So very good. So the last one on our leadership team is Healthy Communities, and I think we all know that Dr. Josh Elder is still on his military duty since he's part of the reserves and he was deployed. But the item I put on here was the housing of highest risk homeless in hotels. Many of you know that there's been a state-funded program called Operation Room Key, wherein the county was able to acquire 20 hotel rooms in Pollock Pines and 20 up in the South Lake Tahoe area. All of those are filled, so we actually had 40 residents in the program, and those were high-risk homeless who we felt had the ability to be somewhat self-quarantined and not driven by other things to roam around and create a lot of problems, et cetera, et cetera. But evidently that program has been very successful, and we were actually able to find, the last report I was in was last Tuesday, we've been able to find permanent housing or more permanent housing for one of those individuals. So we've moved him out of the hotel room into a sustainable housing situation. So I think that's a plus. There is a plan to continue that in terms of delivering the out-service resources that have been put in place through the Department of Health and Human Services, through the nonprofits to help assess what the needs are. And ultimately, we're looking at a plan to try to relocate once the state funding for the Operation Room Key dies. And originally that was thought to be the end of July, but I'm sure now it's going to be at least the end of August if the governor provides the funding. But we need to make sure we had a good, solid plan of where they go after that, and not back out into the encampments and the hillsides, unless that's their first choice, but try to encourage them to get into a different type of program with some continued hand up, and ultimately leading hopefully into some more permanent form of housing. So that process is going on. I'm very happy that we have a coalition supporting that, and we have some of the political parties supporting that. So there's been a concerted effort by all, including Marshall Hospital, Barton Hospital. It's just been a really pleasant experience to see everybody pitching in to try to help that homeless situation get better, with plans of coming up with a navigation center somewhere down the road, with plans of trying to define where we can find a winter sheltering facility similar to the nomadic shelters, because it's all but written in the cards that the nomadic shelters will not operate this year. The church is hosting those things, particularly with very senior volunteers staffing it. They're the most vulnerable. Nobody wants to expose those volunteers to the kinds of things you could get with the normal nomadic shelter situation, given we're at COVID. So we're working real hard to find other alternatives, but the COVID thing really says you don't want to have people living in a conjugate setting. You want them separated. You want distancing. And that's pretty tough to figure out how you do that with a winter sheltering type of process. So we're still working on it. We're working with a lot of the nonprofits, particularly the Tahoe, South Lake Tahoe Coalition. That's a nonprofit that's been helping us a lot in terms of learning curve. Marshall Hospital, as I mentioned before, Martin Entwistle in particular. So we're doing a lot of things that I think are hopefully going to lead to a better potential for a lot of our homeless that have been in those hotels. And then we need to look at how do we take the next round of the homeless that are needing a hand up and are not, chronic homeless that you're never going to change and not subject to having to go through rehab or not subject to having to go through mental health problems before they can be hopefully placed in the more permanent housing. Those are things that are planned in parallel. But I do see changes happening on that front that are significant, and we wouldn't be there, I don't think, without COVID, because COVID has provided a lot of funding from the state, and it's basically empowered and encouraged a lot of our local organizations and the county organizations to really move out and make something happen, working with the city of Placerville. That's the other thing I shouldn't leave out, that there's still ongoing efforts with the city of Placerville to address all these. So the EDOC, COC, the El Dorado Opportunity Knox, continuum of care process is continuing. That continues to gather strength. There's a lot of good things happening relative to healthy communities when it comes to the homeless. So I just want to make sure that was information that people were aware of. And if they want to get involved, contact my office. We have any number of contacts. We can get you a hold of members of the coalition or members of whatever group you might want to participate in to see how we can all contribute to that solution set. So with that, are there any go backs from anybody on the leadership team, the panelists, of things that they want to come back and readdress that we might have skipped over? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move to council member items. I just want to remind everybody that our next meeting is Monday, August the 3rd. There's no doubt that's going to be another Zoom meeting type of format, because I'm sure we won't be meeting in public with the things that are happening right now. I will also confirm that our guest speaker next month will be Ed Manansala. He's our superintendent at El Dorado County Office of Education. So I reached out to Ed, and he did respond, and he is going to be the speaker as best I understand, unless something happens. And if he can't make it, I'm sure that one of his staff will be backing him up. But the intent of that is with the schools originally intending to open up again about August 10th, that would be healthy to have a discussion from Ed, led by Ed, in terms of what he sees happening in the various school districts in the El Dorado Hills area in particular. So Buckeye School District, Rescue Union School District, El Dorado Union High School District. But it's likely to be a lot different discussion now when we get to August 3rd is what it was a week ago before, the governor is imposing these additional things, because I haven't heard definitively of school shutdowns. Don mentioned what's going on in San Diego County and LA County, and I'm sure that's going to have a huge influence on what happens locally. But my personal purview is we've got to get kids back into a normal operation as soon as possible, and there's a lot of data that say they're the least susceptible to having severe or long ongoing issues with COVID contamination. It's the teachers and the administrators and stuff. I guess I'm more concerned with how do we protect them if we try to attempt to open schools up again. But there's a national discussion, there's a state discussion, there's a local discussion, but I do know it puts a tremendous amount of stress on kids when they can't behave normally and meet with their friends, and it's resulting in more suicides. It's resulting in more, I believe, substance abuse in some cases, and so we got to monitor the deaths associated with those causes, if those are truly rapidly increasing as a result of COVID, as opposed to the deaths resulting from COVID. There's got to be some reasonable balance there in getting education back in a more normal state, because I think a lot of people have proven the internet form of education is certainly not as good as, and is really only receptive, highly receptive by what I think are high performing students to start with. The students that can't get it because of broadband limitations, the students are not motivated to learn without a teacher being present, kind of helping coach that. They're the ones that are going to suffer the most if we can't get kids back in school. So I'll leave it at that. Any final comments on any of those comments from anybody on the panel here? Okay, so Kim, one last time, is there anybody who's got their hand raised for something I can't see that we need to open it up to?
No, Supervisor Heidel, there's no additional public comment.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to declare our meeting adjourned. It's about 7:17, and I thank you again for your participation, for your collaboration, cooperation, and all the efforts that are going on. I think together we are making a difference. We just need to keep doing everything we can and stay focused on the important things, including the funding. Is the funding there to make stuff happen? So again, my sincere appreciation for everybody involved. And we'll see you next month, if not before.
Good to see you guys.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
All right.